Welcome to Stupid Repair Tricks. And in today's episode, we have a bunch of lamps that aren't working. And I have the game in diagnostic lamp test. And you can see that there is just a bunch of stuff that's not working. I mean, there are some things that are working, but there's a lot that's not. So immediately, because I'm a repair geek, I thought there was a problem on the board. But stop. Whoa. Before you start getting all invasive on the game, you need to check some simple stuff first. So just because, again, I'm a geek and I always assume the worst, I got out the manual and looked at the lamp matrix and tried to figure out if everything that wasn't working was in a particular row or column. Because if it was in a particular row or column, that would make some sense that there would be a board problem. But to be honest with you, on these WPC games, it's pretty rare to have a lamp matrix problem. They pretty much had that all sorted out well by this era of game. So yeah, I don't see that too often. So what I did is I put the book away, and we're going to try doing the easy stuff first. So I have the playfield lifted up, and you can see here I've got a set of 3 lamps that are not working, and over here I got a bunch of lamps that are working. So there's a couple things. Before we start doing anything, I always check these little connectors, these IDCs, insulation to placement. Just make sure there isn't a wire coming out of the little machine style crimps they have here. But the other thing too is right here, a lot of times you get cracked solder joints where these pins meet the board, and you can typically see this with a little circle that goes around the pin right in the solder joint. You'll see that it's actually physically cracked. I don't see that here. And again, I can always see that. Some people don't have as good eyes as I, but for what it's worth, you can resolder those. But don't resolder them unless you need to. Remember, don't be invasive. Try not to be. So what I do here is I pull a bulb out. This one's not working. And then I take one of these that is working, and I swip it over here. Hey, look! Holy hell! It works. So that means this bulb is bad. But really, is this bulb bad? Let's put this one back in its house up here where we took it from, and let's go back and look at this real close. Here's our suspect bulb and socket. The first thing I always do is pull the bulb out and just look at the brass. Sometimes this right or left side can be actually physically missing. Obviously, if that is, that's going to be a problem. Or you can get corrosion on the brass contacts. These look really clean, and obviously we have both sides. So the socket is not suspect. That leads us to the bulb. Now, if I look at the bulb, I can see the filament in there, and the filament is in one piece, which leads me to suspect the bulb's okay. So what I do is, you'll notice the little wires. One's bent over on one side and one's bent over on the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this wire, I'm going to lift it off like that. See how it's up in the air? And I'm going to actually physically move it to the other side. Now, if in the process of doing this, and I'm going to do it for both sides, and I'm going to move them to their opposite sides. If in the process of doing that, the little wires break, that means the bulb's shot due to corrosion because these wires are not very thick, and you need a new bulb. But now I'm going to slip it back in here, and we're going to go stick it in the game and see what happens. Here we are with my quote, repaired bulb, if it may be. So then what I do is I stick it in there, and look, haha, it works. So just flipping those little contact wires over to the other side of the glass bulb got my bulb working. And why does that happen? Well, if you look at these things, we'll take one that doesn't work. If you look at these things, they're not made very well. They're fairly inexpensive bulbs. And now, you know, so those little wires get a little greening on them, or they're sitting in a different spot on the little brass contacts inside the black socket, and just moving them over seems to do the trick a lot. Now, could have I just put a brand new light bulb in? Well, yeah, I could have done that. If you like giving Terry a Pinball Life and the guy at Pinball Resource, you know, lots of money for bulbs, sure, knock yourself out. Put in new bulbs, throw the old, perfectly good bulbs out. If that's the kind of guy you are, I have no problem with that. But I will say this, these older bulbs work a lot better than the newer stuff they are selling now. All the stuff they sell now is made in China, old like GE bulbs are made way better. One of the big problems, like I just put a new bulb in one of these things and it almost instantly flared up white, which meant that the inside wasn't evacuated from air. And that's the big problem with these new bulbs today, is that they don't evacuate the bulbs. So they leave the air in there, so they don't last very long at all. They just flame out. Another thing I like to mention about bulbs, and this applies to both the 47, 44s, and the 555s. See this one? How it's dark? It's all dark on the bulb itself. What that is a coating on the inside. The bulb should obviously look like this. It should be clear. So what this bulb has done is it's at the end of its life, if it's not already burned out. The filament, the tungsten filament, has burned off and coated the inside of the bulb with the filament remnants, giving it this kind of blackish silver look. This bulb is shot. I mean, it's done. So obviously don't monkey with a bulb that looks like this. You want to start with a bulb that's obviously clear. You know, a bulb like this is just it's past its due. It's had its day. Its time is over. So you don't believe me? Let's try it again. Let's take our bulb out. Let's whip over the wires. Look, I got the first one up. Slide it over to the other side. I got the second one up. Slide it over the other side. Note they didn't break, which is good, because if they break, the bulb is shot. Oh, just make sure your brass contacts are all nice and clean. Put the thing back in here and we try it. Now, if we put this back in the game and the bulb doesn't work, then the bulb's still shot and we got to put a new one in. But if it does work, you know, you just saved yourself 10 cents, and look, we just saved ourselves 10 cents. Or 15 cents, or depending on where you buy the bulb. So anyways, the whole point of this exercise is stupid pinball tricks. Little things you can do to fix your game that don't require any tools, that don't require really any electrical knowledge or schematics or anything, but are common failures in these games. And remember, whenever you have the playfield up on these games, have the coin door open, because on these coin doors there's two switches. One's part of the switch matrix, but this one, this top one, is part of the power bus. So when this switch, you can see, when this switch is in, it turns all the coils on and the flash lamps. When it's out, that is when the coin door's open, all that stuff's off. You want the power to the coils, if the game has that option, off when you do work like this, just in case you drop a bulb and it happens to short against a switch and a coil, or you'd be surprised the wacky crap that can happen. So always have the coin door open. Now, if you need to test the coils and you want the coin door open, or have the coin door open, here's a nifty little trick. It doesn't work on every switch, but you see these ones that have this little indent on the top? You can pull the switch out. And that does the same thing as pushing the switch in. But you see, this pushing the switch in is obviously more work, because you got to hold it with your finger, where you can just pull it out and that'll turn all the power onto the coils. But remember, when you do that and you start monkeying around with stuff under the playfield with the screwdriver, because if you short coil voltage to a switch, you will have to do CPU board repair, and obviously you don't want to do that. And on games like this with under playfield opto boards, you can also smoke those if you short coil voltage to a switch. So what I'm trying to tell you is, be careful, be smart, always work on these newer games with the coin door open. Actually, I just use that as a rule for every game, because I don't know what games have this switch or not, and I don't want to bother to spend the time to investigate it, so I just open the coin door. That way, if there's power, it turns it off. If not, the other thing you can do is you can always remove the coil fuse from the back box, but that's more work and more thinking and more trouble. So if it's got the switch, just take advantage of it. So now we got all the lamps working. Now some people ask me why I'm not using LEDs. Well, I am actually using some LEDs, and you can probably see it pretty easily in the video which lights I am using LEDs for. Usually on green inserts and blue inserts that don't have really good brightness, or a really big insert like this one and this one, I use LEDs. I try not to use them too much because they kind of freak people out. If I need an additional brightness, I always use warm white. I never use cool white. And I use LEDs in the GI. That would be like the slingshots here and down here. But don't go too nuts with them on the inserts. Because they're flashing lights, they just they provide like a strobing effect, and it freaks a lot of people out. Your tolerance for LEDs depends largely on you. Some people get really epileptic from them, and since I have a wide range of people playing my games, I don't want to produce that effect, so I am very cautious about using them. But for the GI, I use them a lot, just because a lot of bulbs are really buried and they're hard to get to, and they last a long time. And when you have as many games as we have here, chasing burnt light bulbs is not something I want to do. But anyways, I hope this was helpful for our slight little talk about light bulbs.